What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to episode 78 of Politically Conscious. This is
What's
a
up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka.
excuse me, real quick, got a little technical difficulties. All right, we back in this thing. Episode 78 of Politically Conscious. If you have been keeping up with what we do, we react to various clips from around the internet about politics and try to give you the real deal, no chaser. I got some background. Hold on. All right, cool. Get myself together. So no intro today because I got a lot of clips and I got a special edition because instead of having my man Emil Bryant, who y'all very well know is very keen, comes from the left of things, I actually invited both of our hosts from the right side of things, Shelly Winters as well as Leo Smith. Leo, you're unmuted right now, so introduce yourself. Tell them what what your background is, so we can get started with our discussion this morning. And I'll introduce Shelly, and we'll get started with the clips.
Hello, I'm Leo Smith. I'm a former Republican National Committee strategist, former Georgia GOP executive, and founder of Engaged Futures Group, which is government relations, public affairs, and business development.
Nah, good stuff. All right, let me unmute my brother Shelly Winters. Thank you, Shelly, for shooting on the show with us as we're trying to cover for our brother Emil Bryant being out this thing. Tell them about your show, and we'll start with our first clip.
Shelley Winter. I'm on 95.5 WSB Atlanta's News and Talk, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m.
I love it. All right, let's get started with this first clip. If anybody's seen the promotions, we didn't do a lot of promotions this morning, but I basically have, again, brought both our brothers from the right of things to talk about, amongst things. And, matter of fact, let me put this put this up here one more time just for people to see it. Basically, hold on one second. There we go. Will black voters and Trump's fraud bring the GOP's reckoning? And so hopefully they'll see where I go today and we'll have them react to our clips, which is what we always do. If y'all are in the comments, we will definitely try to bring some of those to the table as well. But that is where we are going today. I'm going to start with this initial clip. I've actually played this clip on the show with the Mill previously, but I never got an opportunity to present this clip to my brothers on the right of things. And so let's start with this clip from Rachel Maddow. Let me pull this down and get their reaction to this clip right here. Based on, let me set the context as well. So, Shelly, you've always been on the show talking about historically how for specifically this election, Trump was able to build a coalition of various voters. To include the black vote for modern presidents, he got the highest black vote of all presidents at 15% total, which was a 1% higher than Reagan got back in the early 80s. But a lot of that was driven by black men who were 21% of the vote. And so what I'm highlighting and bringing you guys to the show is, hey, he built that coalition. I'm wondering, has there been a betrayal in a sense, since he was able to gain that coalition? What's happened with the administration since? And here's one thing that has happened, or a few things that have happened, and I want to get both of you guys' thoughts on what I consider some things that have happened since he's taken office.
The other side of it.
But on the issue of race, on the treatment of African Americans specifically, even being terrible at what they're doing has still proven to be disastrous for our country. And it is, in part, the posturing from the White House and the president. That is stuff that validates and excites the worst bigots in the country, and that is consequential. But it's more than that, too. We are now about 16 months into what has been from day one a concerted and intense targeting of black Americans, specifically by this president and by this administration. On his first full day in office, he proclaims war on diversity efforts, not only in government, but in any institution in the country over which he can exert leverage, everything from schools and universities to law firms to private businesses of every stripe. He then immediately started firing some of the highest profile black public officials in the whole U.S. government, seemingly regardless of any other thing about them. I mean, Right away, we get the firing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Charles C.Q. Brown. We get the firing of the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden. And then it's Gwynne Wilcox from the National Labor Relations Board. And then it's Robert Primus, the chair of the Surface Transportation Board. And then it's Alvin Brown from the NTSB. And then it's Peggy Carr, the head of the National Center for Education Statistics. And then it's Willie Phillips from FERC, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And then it's Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and on and on and on. When Trump and his top political donor, Elon Musk, then started just lopping off huge swaths of the federal government to disastrous practical effect, the largest and most egregious cuts targeted federal agencies that employed a disproportionate number of black employees. Reporter Erica Green wrote about this a few months ago for The Times, noting that nothing had moved backwards in the federal government for black Americans this quickly or this far in over 100 years. Since Woodrow Wilson came in 1912 and resegregated the federal workforce. Quote, black employees were fired or demoted to lower-level jobs, relegated to separate and inferior lunchrooms and other facilities, and accused of making white women feel unsafe. Those who remained were humiliated. A black worker in the Postal Service was surrounded by screens, so white workers would not have to look at him. Another employee had a cage built around him to separate him from his white counterparts. A clerk in the Treasury Secretary's office was assigned to rewrite all correspondence to address black employees by their first names, the way Trump addressed the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, by her first name when he crowed publicly about firing her for no reason. In the year of our Lord, 2025.
All right, Shelley, I'll start with you again. You've talked about the coalition that was built. And so I ask at this point, based on some of the policies, why wouldn't some of those people that voted now feel betrayed? And as we always ask, what's propaganda inside of that video from Rachel Maddow from your perspective? Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, brother. I got you. We're coming on right now. All right, go ahead, brother.
I don't think there's any propaganda. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. The coalition he built, let's start with Hispanics. That's been destroyed because of moving ICE into cities. You just laid out for African Americans, but for African Americans, the growth that he had with African Americans had much to do with the economy and less to do with those kinds of stories that she touted. Everybody gets fired when a new administration comes in, starting with the heads of organizations. This particular administration just happened to target much lesser known boards and committees and things like that. But Joint Chiefs of Staff they usually resign. There's a famous story, what's his name? Ramsey Davis, after Kennedy, was it Kennedy? Leo, you can help me here, but Ramsey, the Attorney General before Nixon, when Nixon won in '68, the Attorney General Ramsey, I can't remember his last name, would not resign and had to be fired, which prompted the trial of the Chicago Seven with the new Attorney General. So people are regularly fired when new administrations come in, but they usually resign. That's why you don't have the conversation about people being fired. That's the first thing. The second thing is the coalition was broken up a long time ago when the economy went bad. Most of the African Americans that voted for Trump in 2024 are not about racial classification or things what Rachel Maddow was talking about. Those people that went to Donald Trump in 20 and 24, by and large, it was about the economy and Biden's economy hurting them. But as far as the coalition being broken up, yeah, absolutely it's being broken up. The biggest part of the coalition being broken up, forget black voters, because we're only a small percentage of the total vote. Working class voters, white working class voters especially, have turned on Donald Trump very much to their minuses, much negative, upside down with white working class voters. So the whole coalition is being broken up. It's not just one group.
Nah, fair enough. Looks like we lost Brother Leo. Hopefully we'll get him in to get his thoughts on this as well. Okay, let me see. Just jump back in here. All right. All right, we got you back in here, brother Leo. I know
Okay.
technical difficulties gonna survive them, but anyway, your thoughts on what Rachel Maddow had to say? Again, this is me just kind of bringing something that me and Emil had talked about and said from our perspective. Mine and Emil, we didn't have either one of you that day. We highlighted. We felt like there was a concerted attack on African Americans, even though more African Americans had voted for him. And I didn't get a chance to say this to Shelley, but I recall one time on a previous show, Shelley, in a sense, highlighted. I'm sorry. He had highlighted that not only did more black men, in a sense, vote for him, but there was one time he was saying that he was upset about what was when they took down the slaves at the George Washington Monument somewhere in Pennsylvania or something like that. You were upset about that, Shelley, and you were saying, well, now that a lot of black people talk so bad about Trump, you get it. But they had voted for him, so I don't understand from a black perspective, Leo, if you will, your thoughts on this concerted effort, or do you see it as a concerted effort? How about that, Leo?
So in politics, you not only take advantage of whatever your strategy is, what you need to do to manage your agenda, to put loyalists around you in order to manage their agenda. And Shelley already talked about that. Some of these things are natural sort of transition kind of planning where some people from past, administrations are let go. Shelley described that perfectly. The other issue that I think is really important, if I somehow decided that I'm going to field a football team and every one of my my team is white, okay? And then I say, oh, wait a minute, I need to make this more metrics oriented, okay? More representational of the population. Well, that means that 15 to 18% of the population is black. So I want 15% players on my team. That means I got to let go a bunch of white guys. Then white people would say, oh, they're discriminating against the white guys. So here's why I'm saying this for your listeners. Black people were disproportionately, and I've said this on your show before, Montoya, black people were disproportionately represented in the federal government. We know why. Because when Jim Crow and segregation and workforce discrimination was banned, the easiest place, because the federal government was enforcing it, was for black people to go to work for the federal government. We also know that the biggest movement of blacks into the middle class happened in the Department of Education. Trump was against the Department of Education. He made promises to his folks that he was going to do something about education. I'm an educational reformer. Something needed to be done. You don't have to agree what would need to be done, but in order to renovate the house, he just said, I'm going to close the shop. Now that hurt black people because we were too much, right? We were 36% of Department of Education employment, and we're only 18% of them. So of course, I understand how people feel attacked. Now, here's the second part. So now we got that. That's just numerical facts. Black people were overrepresented in the federal government, so therefore we're going to feel the pain. The second part is that, yeah, then it becomes good messaging that for white people who felt like they're being left behind, or black people have gotten too competitive. We don't need all these, affirmative actions, restorative justice kinds of things. White people were really actually even jealous of us a little bit, many of them. So yeah, Trump's going to use that message too, but it doesn't mean that his intent in reducing the federal workforce was targeting black people. I understand how we feel targeted because we were certainly impacted, but it doesn't mean that we were intentionally targeted.
Okay, let me ask y'all to answer to these, both of you answer to these numbers, and then we'll go to our next clip. So, from my perspective, again, just being a data guy, and again, that's what we're here for, to have dialogue and see what y'all give more context to this. But these are the things that have happened, particularly since he became president this time. We were averaging $9 billion in government contracting as a community over the past 3 administrations. We went down to 1 point, and to include his first administration. Like, again, I want to give the numbers straight, no chaser. So we average about 9 billion. With this concerted attack, we now have went to 1.4 trillion. I mean, I keep saying trillion, I'm sorry, 1.4 billion. That is a concerted difference. Our unemployment under Biden, for example, as bad as the Biden economy was, we were at a record low of 4.8%, which had been a continuation of, through the Obama, through the Trump, through the Biden administration, we saw that unemployment decrease after the 2008 crash to the economy, but it was down to 4.8. And now, specifically in this term, this is something that's unique because typically in all my years of watching the unemployment data, because I've been, I love data, as y'all know, all my years of watching it, typically our unemployment as African Americans was double that, if you will, of white unemployment. Outside of the last 8 years, that number had reduced because unemployment had went so low for the entire country. Well, currently, right now, ours is at 7.4%, and white unemployment has remained stable, even in this economy right now. We also know that under some of those things that Rachel Maddow pointed out, there's no money, for example, going to black maternal deaths. We have the rate for black women getting off the table after a pregnancy is 5 times higher that they won't get off the black maternal death rate is equal to that of some of the underdeveloped countries, specifically for black women. There's no money under this administration going to that research. It was prior. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll let y'all jump in, and this is not specifically under this administration. This is since the Supreme Court took down affirmative action for colleges, if you will. So at the top 50 elite colleges, we have 18% less black men going and 27% less black women going. And we've already talked about on the show many a times, there was no truth to underqualified people being allowed into college because of the rules that have been set in place because of the law of 77 and a last court case in 88. You can't let unqualified people in. So that was just political narratives to suggest that. And so what's happening, and the reason that big drop is happening, is a lot of our elite kids could go to, for example, a lot of the Ivy schools free of charge. Now that they can't, they're just basically they're just going to their state schools and stuff like that because they don't have the money to go, even though they might qualify. That's a big reason why you see such big differences in the thing. So how would the black men and black women that voted not look at that as a target? Because you're right about the overrepresentation in the government, but I don't know that. I think these numbers are directly related to the policies. Either one of you, I'll let Shelly jump in first because I know I got him on mute. Go ahead,
I
Shelly.
don't understand the question.
So I'm simply saying I laid out all of those stats. How do you? Yeah, I'm saying for you. Yeah, the question is for you guys as conservatives who still, I don't know who y'all vote for. I would just say, but for you both as conservatives, how does the African American community not look at these policies that created the numbers I just said as not a direction towards the African American community? I get that we're disproportionately represented in the government on jobs, but these other numbers are not. Those are direct policies.
Well, no, they're not, because let's start with the colleges and affirmative action. That lawsuit was brought by Asian Americans, and the Asian Americans brought that lawsuit to say they were being knocked out, not by less qualified black people, by less qualified white people. That was their argument. Their argument was...
I read it directly. That was not their argument.
Okay, all right. So their argument was less qualified. You said there was no evidence of it. That was the evidence. You put black in there. Their evidence was never racial. Their evidence was, I got a perfect score on SAT, I got straight A's, I didn't get into Harvard. But the guy, black or white or Hispanic or whomever, did. And so they were the ones who sued. And won that lawsuit. And so now what you're seeing now is that less African Americans and Hispanics are getting into Ivy League schools, but that same elite kid that's going to University of Georgia is outperforming his peers at University of Georgia. The kids that were getting into Harvard, many of them, not all, many of them were not lasting 4 years.
That's not no. There's a 99% graduation rate. I'll show it to you after the show.
After graduation rate in 4 years or 5 or 6 years.
5 years.
Right. Okay.
That's a 5-year number.
Georgia State has a 99% graduation rate in 5 years. I mean, come on.
That's not true.
But the point is, what I'm trying to say is you made it about a black targeted affirmative action. It's not. It was Asian Americans suing. First. Second, as for the thought of people like us, I've been mad since the Big Beautiful Bill. and I've been publicly mad since the big beautiful bill. So there's no that's October. I mean, I'm sorry, that's July, August. So to act like now we're supposed to be as African American conservatives all of a sudden regretting our vote, that will never happen. Because you didn't regret your vote when you cast it for Biden in 2020 and the economy went south. So the point is that am I mad? Of course I'm mad. But I'm not mad at those things first. I'm mad at the economy first. I'm mad at the war first. I'm mad at being lied to by spending and higher deficits first. Before I get to that other stuff, I mean, like Leo said, there's many reasons beyond. No one's targeting you to the point where you think they are. And most people don't care. And this idea that everyone's out to get you, you can find the evidence. Just like ex-girlfriend can find the evidence that I cheated on them at some point if they look hard enough. But the point of the matter is, I'm going in a different direction this election because of the economy and things that I disagree with that I was told were not going to happen, but is happening, that are happening.
All right, go ahead, Leo.
I mean, look, here's the reality, and neither Shelley and I are disagreeing with the fact that as a result of systemic slavery in America, a Reconstruction plan that did not follow through on its promises, a reaction to Reconstruction and the freeing of slaves, Jim Crow, et cetera, that stuff is all very real. You're not going to find two conservatives here saying that stuff isn't real. The lasting impact of that and the responses sometimes created conditions, right, that had to be constantly maintained and explained, right? So when you talk about Reconstruction, but yet those Asian American new immigrants to America don't have the historical understanding as to why the restorative justice and education and opportunity was presented to Black people, then white people who are also miffed about it, then aside with them because they know that Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't understand that history as a new immigrant, it's like first generation immigrant. These are the things that when I was in equal opportunity affirmative action administration at Virginia Tech, we were constantly explaining why focus on Black Americans, descendants of slavery. We were doing cluster hiring in the faculty. We were making sure that people and students included understood the functional reason we were committed to this work. Civil rights leaders dropped the ball on that. They dropped the ball. Then diversity became this effusive sort of like, we are the world, everybody's good, postmodern relativism, and then Black people and the reason for affirmative action got lost. So I don't really necessarily, like the affirmative action thing, I don't make that argument because I think in part we fail to make sure that people understood the purpose of it and why we were doing it as an American society.
Okay, so you could say, here it is. Let me ask you this, Emil. I'm sorry, Leo. So I don't disagree with what you just said, but how do I not look at specifically what this administration did as not a concerted effort to take it away? Because here it is. Although we didn't explain, and as you just said, we didn't do a good job of explaining how it was needed, we still got the results. We still got the results.
What do you tell me a little bit? Tell me a little bit more when you say the administration made a concerted effort to take it away. Now, I think I heard you. The thing that I heard you say that's clarion clear to me, because remember, my son just went through the admissions process.
Right.
Okay?
And he was going for free.
And he chose not. And he chose not to go. He had two IB opportunities. One of them wanted him to play football. He says, "I'm not going to play football. I want to be an academic." Right. The other one said, "We'll take you, but you're going to be a full pay." So I think you're right on that.
I know I'm right. I did administration into colleges. That's what I did for a living.
And so you're right. My son probably would have gotten a full ride.
No, probably he would have. This is how it worked. Just 4 years ago.
But he decided, because he's a responsible kid, I raised him, right? He said, "Dad, why would I do that? Cost you all that money when you already paid for Westminster, and then I could go to a top 13 business school, and then go to them for grad, right?" So he's playing it out. In other words, the real harm to my son Montoya, That's one personal family anecdotal just on me. I am not so sure that black people are going to be essentially really damaged, because when you talk about the black kids who had the opportunity to get into an Ivy, that's not a huge number. And those kids, in my opinion, and research supports this, Montoya, if they still go to a top 50 school in America, those kids generally are going to do well anyway. And sometimes better when they go to a less, because my son is like, I don't want to go to Penn.
Now you're getting anecdotal. Now you're getting anecdotal because there is absolutely.
That's also research. But I don't know that it's going to hurt us as much as it feels.
Also, there is here it is. So, but let's admit that it was done. Let's just go with that. This was done intentionally based on executive orders. Let's at least admit that it was done. Go ahead.
Wait, hold on. Let me finalize this, because the comfort and the freedom that universities at the Ivy level to give out money to minorities based on affirmative action goals, yes, because of the affirmative action attack on the affirmative action law, and yes, because of the mood of the Trump administration, which is against Ivies in general, that killed it. So that's what I agree with you.
Let me say this.
Right.
If the question is, are we targeted? I think there's a lot of people targeted. The middle class is being targeted. The Hispanics are being targeted. Like, again, this idea that someone is targeting you and only you.
Well, so don't put the only on it. Don't put only on what I said. Here it is. If we're talking about, watch this. I'm cutting on. Wait. Don't put only on what I said, because here's the dialogue we're having on politically conscious. The dialogue we're having on politically conscious is, why would the vote be continued since there is an attack?
It's not going to be.
It's not going to continue.
It's not going to be continued. We've already answered that. That's why I asked
fair enough. I didn't. Okay, my bad. Fair enough.
Your question, because the coalition was broken up when ICE went into cities. We lost Hispanics. All the things you're running down about, all of that
makes sense.
Open up the coalition. This was an opportunity. Let me tell you, there are two opportunities in our country to bring people together, at working class and middle class people. The first was the great crash of 2008. When the Tea Party started and Occupy Wall Street started, they were both saying the same thing. Who's going to help us? And the media and the political parties came in and divided them. There was a golden opportunity for the world, for the country to come together of working class, middle class people. The second opportunity was when he built this coalition. But the coalition was built on a lot of different groups coming together because of the economy. And had he focused on that for the last 2 years, just the economy, that coalition would have grown. But by doing all the side stuff, which you've been mentioning and everything else, it broke up the coalition, and that's it. Now you're back to base voting and the largest growing or fastest growing political party in this country right now are independent voters. So, and that's why it is. So that coalition is gone, and that's why it is.
And Shelley and I both know, Montoya, just to keep it real, when we built these,
makes sense. All right.
Montoya, can I jump in on that real quick? Because I want to talk about that. So when we built that coalition, and Shelley was part of that grew nationally, and even another Georgians created something for Trump kind of thing. You had people like Haitian American people who became national figures in the Republican strategy, who are now against.
Shelley, is Leo going in and out, or is that?
No, it's mute me.
Okay, got you.
No, mute me.
Mute you. Okay, got you. Just checking.
Mute me.
Okay, got you. I will. Let me play this. All right, Shelley, this one is directly in response to you were on the show in the past, and I had this thought as I think about this. The position that we're in now, and I know me and Leo on previous conversations have talked about, in a sense, a perspective of those who, quote unquote, got a hold of Trump. Because I think all of us have agreed that what Trump did the first time is very different than what he's doing this time, if you will. And so there are people in the administration that have, in my opinion, way more influence than, in my opinion, they should have than they had in the previous administration. And so, Shelley, one time I brought you on the show and I actually asked you this question. We were talking about the conversation between who was the most divisive president, whether it was Obama or Trump. We were having that conversation, and I said, well, we came out of 8 years of Obama, so why would we transition from all the good things that Obama had done? Why would we ever position to transition to Trump? And I know you were a big advocate of Trump. So here's what was said on that show, and I'll get your response to this, Shelley. I just went down a little quick rabbit hole, objectively as best as I could, and here's what we left with Obama and then turned to Trump after Obama was at the time able to get us the lowest unemployment that we had, right? The economy was booming after Obama. He did increase the debt, which unfortunately a lot of presidents haven't done that. And graduation rates reached the highest in history for high school under Obama. Actually increased graduation rates significantly for Hispanics and Blacks under the time. Dropout rates dropped significantly, and we know even though the ACA was not perfect, it got a lot of people on healthcare, which the defiant lawyer just pointed out. So what were we switching to? If I could ask, what was wrong? What were we switching to? And again, that was just me doing a little objective, like what? I literally was like, what was good, what was bad? I just looked these things up, and the things I just came up with were where we were at that time. Why was it so bad? And we needed to turn to Trump based on the track record I just laid out. Shelley, what do you recall at that time?
Let me tell you. First of all, let's do this. Let's take the race out of it, right? Let's take it out for a second. Every president brings in the next president. In other words, every president, especially a two-term president, is responsible for the next president because it's always usually a reaction against what was done over 2 terms. Right. So what I've always criticized Obama for was one thing and one thing only. I always felt that his entirety of his foreign policy was Bush 2.0. That's all I've ever disagreed with him on. I always felt that Obamacare was always supposed to be a start to fixing healthcare in this country.
So using that clip, I'll ask you and Leo, what did y'all want to transition? If you because I understand foreign policy, you disagree with Obama on that. But if that was in a sense, Shelley, hold on, I got you. Hold on, let me bring you back on. Sorry. Let me bring you back on.
No, hold on. I know what you're going to ask. Let me answer that really quickly. No one transitioned from anything. We didn't like Hillary. It's a very simple answer. This idea that people were sitting around saying, oh my God, never a black president. There wasn't a black president running against Trump. So there wasn't a transition from a black president. We didn't like Hillary. It was a transition from Obama, Trump versus Hillary, period. That was it.
That makes it real for right now. I don't know if Shelley would mute, so they were not. That makes it real for now. So yes, let's go ahead and strategize. Let's game this out. Black people are going to vote less for Republicans in the next election, okay? But who are they going to vote for? If the Democrats don't have a decent leader that resonates with black working class people, black middle class people, black voters, not black hip hop singers who don't vote, who just raise noise but never come out. I'm talking about the real black voting base, right? If they don't create a candidate, you're still not going to see any impact in a way that will give more black voice because black people are going to sit out. You might have specific races at the gubernatorial level, the local level that will see good black turnout. But if they don't put up a good candidate federally, nationally, we're not going to see good black turnout. So, and that's the same element here. The Democrats have to have someone that truly can lead from a black ethos.
Yeah, go ahead, Shelley. Let me get you back in here 1 second. Go ahead, brother.
Let me add this before I go. Republicans face the same disenchantment with their voters. if they don't put someone up, if Vance or Ruby, if Vance especially is the nominee in 28, you'll see Republican turnout drop considerably back to when it was with Romney and McCain, because they're going to feel disenchanted. The political parties, it's my hope that within my lifetime I see a point where the parties won't exist and people will be voting for candidates and not party affiliated candidates, because they're losing power, they're losing sway in parties. Of course, there are people hanging on to DNR, but for the most part, people are looking at individual candidates, and I think that plays to all of our benefit. So yeah, Leo's right about
Yeah,
Democrats.
let me ask you this question. What you saying there before you go? Let me ask you this question, because I love what you're saying. Again, that's what politically conscious is, to raise how we look at and understand politics. So something I just recently heard and learned, and I want to see your thoughts before you go, because of what you're talking about now. You're right. We're at like 43% of people have went independent, like, which is the highest we've ever seen in the country. So you already mentioned that, Shelley. So I was just listening to a broadcast just a couple days ago. Other countries that have democracies, some of them use proportionate, maybe I'm saying it right, wrong, proportionate representation, versus we use win or all, take all, if that makes sense. So in other words, if would allow for more third party or more individual candidates to be able to run, in the sense that if they get some representation, that
I,
representation would be
I don't want to
represented
see
in
that.
the government.
I,
So they
yeah, I
use
don't want to see
proportional
that.
versus we use winner take all. Are
I
y'all
don't want to
familiar
see
with
that.
that? Any thoughts on that, Shelley?
I don't want to see
Okay.
that. I want to see us go to a thing where Shelley goes to the poll and decides upon the candidate to vote for, not based on what party, whether it's Republican, Democrat, working families, ESA, libertarian, whatever it is. I go to the polls and I look at a candidate and I say, okay, I like this guy because I want sports gambling legalized in Georgia, and he's for sports gambling, and I'm gonna vote for him. That's what I want to see more and more people do. And I think that benefits all of us.
All right, I respect it. I respect your time.
And I'll
Thank you for your time, brother.
see you later, Leo. I'll talk to you soon.
See you later, buddy. Keep
All right, no
up the
doubt.
good work.
Any thoughts on what we were just talking about, Leo, from your
See you later,
perspective?
Leo. I'll talk to you soon.
See you later, buddy. Keep up the good work. All right, good. No, I mean, I think Shelley's spot on. Just like
I'm getting a bad signal, so I think it's me.
No,
go ahead.
I mean, I think Shelley's spot on. Do you have multiple channels open? You might have multiple pages. Do you have multiple channels open?
No, I don't know. Yeah, am I coming through clear? Because I'm just wondering. I wonder
No,
what
I
the
hear you.
audience is seeing.
I hear you
Sometimes I don't hear
clearly.
you guys.
No, I hear you clearly.
Okay, it might just be my end. Okay, good. Go ahead.
Right. So look. George Washington. Chop down the cherry tree, George Washington. Don't know. When he left the presidency, he said, beware the political parties. They're going to ruin our country. Shelley Winter just said the same. The number for independence, which I've been tracking this and working with Chris in the Data Project, with the Carter Center, tracking this data. The largest voting bloc in America, and that's growing. The latest data that I saw was 47%, up 3 more percentage from last year. So it's growing. That's a good thing. Is one of the reasons why the two parties are fighting with their extremes, because now there's a fight for them to define themselves, right? On the basis of so many people saying, I don't believe in what you're doing and you're not relevant. So this is a good problem, a metamorphosis. Talking about transition. May not have been intentional by the political parties, so they just want to hold power. But this is a good transition in getting Americans to think about, well, who are we? What do we stand for in this modern 21st century? How do we make true our Constitution in a way that truly represents each other's unity out of many one? This is the fight we're having, and I'm not afraid of it. I think it's a good fight. But we do have to equip our people, like you do on this show, to understand the fight we're in, how we got into it, And how do we impact the rules, or how do we even argue that some rules should continue to exist and some should not? Like Shelley, I don't like proportionism, especially when you got a fairly uneducated voter base. Now, that sounds like some of our framers as well, that felt that people needed to have a certain skin in the game, stakeholders, property owners, da, 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 da. Some of that stuff was based on racism and misogynism and, men only, but it wasn't just saying that white men should be able to vote. It was white men, farmers, property owners of a certain level of awareness and education. So they discriminated against uneducated white people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? So look, what was the value of that? That's a fair question. Should all people be trusted to make a majority win kind of thing? Well, America would be in a lot of trouble if we use mob rule.
Right. Nah, good thoughts. These are strong thoughts, and again, I'm glad we're walking through it and talking through it. That's why we do politically conscious. Again, I wish we had our brother Emil here to represent, in a sense, the other side. I'm trying to represent as best as possible, but then these are great dialogues. Here's a reality, and I know, and you're such a realist, Leo, that you're like, okay, well, here's the fight because it is what it is. But to your point, this going off the Voters' Rights Act, that was very intentional, because now it does, based on the parties themselves trying to fight to maintain power, because they see what you're talking about, more people becoming independent. So if they can, because here's the thing, just to teach people, and I learned this just this week myself, that the parties themselves are private entities, so they get to make their own rules. Now, I've watched them make their own rules. I just never connected it to the fact that they were private entities, right? I've watched them, because as an independent, I don't get to vote sometimes if I don't vow one side or the other when I go to the polls. Sometimes I've had to only vote on the actual amendments, because I wouldn't declare a party as an independent, right? I've went through that because the parties make their own rules. So if I can make all of that make sense to all of you watching, so what happened is, what we're facing, again, I agree. And Leo and Shelley both know, I've been asking African Americans to be independents for 15 years. So more power to anyone who's choosing to become independent, but specifically our community. I've been on this game for a long time. Not that makes me special or anything, but the reason I'm highlighting it is because what specifically just happened with the Voters' Rights Act, we as citizens now must be aware it was done because of the fear of more Americans becoming independents. Because what happens now is they can almost control the votes for states. So what happens is, we have currently a few purple states, but the goal for both parties with this change will to ensure that the state is blue or red, period. And they will not make rules that make it easy for us to vote independently for who we like. So this is really a last effort to retain the power by the parties, and we need to just be aware of how they are trying to do it. Now, for us as African Americans, we're absolutely seeing them, generally speaking, the map change to cut out our vote. I'm just highlighting that the bigger play is really the parties themselves, because it really just gave, if you will, even the Republicans and this administration went after the Voter Rights Act, it literally gave even the Democrats an excuse to do the same thing, to just make their states all blue. So they both, yes, the administration, let me call it, I'm just trying to call it straight. The administration started it. It was an attack, a direct attack. And for any African American that feels it was an attack on us, I will give you that. But the Democrats took an opportunity to say, okay, well, now we're forced to do it too. And it's really both the parties just not wanting us, not just black people, but the country, to become independents and disregard them as parties. They want you stuck in having to go one way or the other, or disenfranchised because in your state, your side doesn't have power. That's the results of what has come of this, even though but what I'll say this, Leo, and I'll let you respond. And this has always been the case in America. When you go after Black America, it hurts America. That's what's happened with this Voters' Rights Act. Go ahead, brother.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. We're only strongest as our weakest link.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. We're only
So
strongest as our
that is an
weakest link.
issue for us.
So
So
that is an
indeed,
issue for
also,
us.
you understand the
So
party. I'm more of
indeed,
a
also,
strategist on
you
policy, and I
understand
find
the
the
party.
party that best supports my
I'm more of a
policy in
strategist
order to
on
get it
policy, and I find the
implementation.
party that best
I am a
supports my
conservative, so
policy
I
in
was
order to
more
get it
aligned with
implementation.
Republicans than I
I am a
was
conservative, so I
Democrats.
was more aligned
But
with
people who know
Republicans than
me
I
and
was
work with me
Democrats.
include
But people
civil
who know
rights
me and
leaders
work
who
with
vote
me
Democrat and
include
conservative
civil
hardcore
rights
right
leaders who
wingers
vote Democrat and
equally,
conservative hardcore
because
right
the
wingers
issue is representation
equally,
of those
because the
independent
issue is
voices. So
representation
the
of
Joe
those
Manchins of the
independent
world,
voices.
okay, who
So
is
the Joe
now
Manchins
growing
of the world,
independent movement
okay, who is now
organization,
growing
the John Fetterman
independent
of the world,
movement
who is
organization, the
balking
John
against,
Fetterman of the
you
world,
know,
who is
having to toe the party
balking
line in all
against,
cases on all
having to
rhetoric
toe
and
the party line in
communications.
all
Although
cases
John
on all
Fetterman pretty
rhetoric
much
and
votes
communications.
Democrats are
Although
upset
John
with him,
Fetterman pretty
but
much
sometimes he
votes
says we
Democrats,
should
Democrats
talk
are
to,
upset with
engage
him.
with, and
Sometimes he
trust
says
some
we should
Republicans
talk to,
on policy
engage with,
issues.
and trust
Please have the
some
conversation.
Republicans
So
on policy
these
issues.
are elements
Please have
that
the
are happening
conversation.
in
So
America that present
these are
amazing
elements that are
opportunities
happening in America that present
to
amazing
redefine our
opportunities.
democracy
Gotcha.
boundaries, our
Hey, let me have.
guardrails,
Redefine our
and we're going to do
democracy
that.
boundaries, our guardrail, and we're going to do that.
All right. Another thing that I talked about for this show was the amount of fraud that we're seeing, to the extent that Shelley had to leave. But he's even said on this show, at one point, him and Emil went back and forth about fraud, right? And Emil had said on the show a long time ago, he said that he felt like the fraud that we're seeing under President Trump is unprecedented. At the time, Shelley offered as a counter that Biden's was pretty, bad at the time. And then a lot of months later, Shelley had to say, okay, this is unprecedented. And so one of my concerns was, in a sense, how will it hurt President Trump and the Republicans specifically? Because, quote unquote, he's a lame duck president that I still think there's a reality that he won't try to leave office. But let me just highlight this clip just to show how some of the fraud is being looked at.
Why not have the two Democratic governors embrace this federal fraud?
Well, he did. Rewind the tape, not fast forward, back to April of this year. They had a big press conference. California prosecutors worked for Gavin Newsom, busted a hospice fraud ring, $267 million in fraud. They were doing that without the administration. Jesse says, well, why doesn't Gavin do this himself? Why doesn't he open up the books? Why doesn't he care about the fraud? You have the $267 million. California submitted a 60-page, quote-unquote, integrity action plan in February to the federal government, has gotten no response. They've been reaching out to the federal government for details on the widespread fraud and have gotten no response.
That's not true.
Yes, it is true.
He's buying the BS he's selling,
Okay.
Jessica. They said just document the
Here-
payments are legit, and he can't do it.
Here are three facts that you cannot refute.
He messed up.
Newsom signed hospice licensing moratorium in 2021. The Trump administration replicated it in 2026. The Trump administration even praised Newsom's crackdown on EBT fraud. They had an 80% drop. The Undersecretary, Patrick Penn, said, it's one of those good news stories we want to promote. And then there is the elephant in the room, which is that Donald Trump has either commuted the sentences of or pardoned people who have defrauded American people through the Medicare and Medicaid system to the tune of almost $2 billion. So they want us to take RFK Jr. seriously or Donald Trump when they talk about fraud, and they're pardoning the fraudsters themselves. That reeks to me.
These health.
It's bad out there from my perspective, Leo. I forgot to set the context for that clip. Initially, it was, I guess, the Fox News analyst saying to her, hey, look at what Newsom's doing. And she just kind of corrects and says, hey, here's what he's actually done. Here's the record. And, hey, we have our president and this administration going as far as to basically pardon these people. And there's also the people there are also people in Congress that are saying, hey, why isn't the Attorney General doing an investigation on a pay for pardon thing that we've talked about this show. That's kind of always existed, period, point blank. If we just want to be very honest about pay for pardons. So I don't want to act like, you know what I'm saying, like we're not aware of it. But it does seem to be being done on a different level, specifically under Trump. And so I guess the bigger question is not whether he did it or not, but how much will it hurt in a sense, Republicans and conservatives with how far he's went. I think Americans are seeing this and seeing this clearly on a different level with him. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
No, I think that
No, I
there's
think that there's.
I can't hear you right now, brother. Hold on one second. I think you got
yeah,
muted by
just
accident.
making sure that I think there are
Americans
Americans who, especially MAGA,
Americans,
who acknowledge that the fraud that Trump administration may be involved with, which is mostly self-serving, is not necessarily wasteful administration, is different than the kind of stuff that we see in Minnesota, California, which is a mismanagement of administration. I mean, even of our own city of Atlanta, there's been admission. Admission of incredible. Misty Vickers is in the newspaper today in Atlanta Journal-Constitution, serving a federal sentence she asked for pardon because of all the fraud that took place in Reed's administration. Look, Keisha Lance Bottoms sent millions of dollars back that wasn't being used properly. She hired an attorney that she said that she did not hire. The attorney paid her $8,000. She gave the attorney $770 per hour back in the city. So in other words, I don't think any citizen who pays attention is surprised that fraud is happening. But I hope that as we see all this outrageously obvious fraud, in our next future administration, there will be more checks and balances. And more citizens will be aware of how the fraud occurs, how the game is played, and then therefore we might be more engaged.
Yeah, you're going in and out, so I hope that's not. I thought some of the listeners said they do hear an echo with you, so hopefully you're not going in and out for them. What I will say, and hopefully you can respond to this. Here's something that I've noticed recently, just in the current campaigns that are being run. Some of that here specifically in Georgia, and so, for example, I saw like Ossoff, for example, John Ossoff here in Georgia is proposing, for example, legislations that will deal with some of the fraud. The response I've seen from conservatives in response to Ossoff is to continue to particularly point different people inside of the Democratic Party who have did fraud also. Similar to what that clip just did, where initially the guy was saying, hey, look at what's happening in California. And then the lady corrects him and says, well, no, that's not exactly what happened. This is what happened. And I'm sitting here going, okay, if there's bills being pushed to actually deal with the fraud, why do conservatives just point to the fraud in the other party versus just latching on and say, let's get rid of this fraud? And I think there's an opportunity, if you will, for the Democrats to push that messaging, from my perspective, in a way that would be to their advantage, because I'm always shocked that the political narrative of the other side is just to point to the fraud versus agreeing to the policy. Another example of that, Leo, is Emil's always talked about how we know gerrymandering has always been misused, if you will, by both parties, to their favor to keep power. But there's also been Democratic legislators who've offered to get rid of gerrymandering. And the conservatives are the ones who always fight that overall, from at least the perspective I've seen from what Emil's taught me, they're the ones that have fought getting rid of it. So in this situation, kind of saying the same thing. Go ahead.
That's not true.
Okay, I need Emil for this one, but go ahead.
It only takes a small little Google to find out that both Republicans and Democrats have fought to keep gerrymandering. And the small blips once in a while of people who wanted to get rid of gerrymandering, they're a minority in both parties, but both parties have representatives who want to get rid of gerrymandering. There's no difference there. Okay, so there's no difference there.
Okay.
So on the issue of, I'm trying to remember. You were making a point before that. Misinformation that got me off track a little bit. But you were making a point even before that. Remind me, Montoya.
Well, no, you had already answered it. I just simply asked you, was this fraud going to be seen and hurt the Republicans and the conservatives, and you just basically broke down from
It's
your
not going to.
perspective.
So it's not
you
a
know,
shift.
You think
It's
people?
not gonna. So it's not
Yeah.
a shift.
So
Yeah.
the only thing
You
that
said you didn't think so.
impacts
So
the only thing that impacts the election
the only thing that
is
impacts
a
the
shift
election
in sentiment
is a shift in sentiment
based on knowledge
based on
that
knowledge
makes people vote different.
that makes people vote.
So Republican voters have already
So
said that they're
Republican
okay
voters
with
have already
Trump's
said
type
that
of
they're
fraud.
okay with Trump's type of fraud.
So what the Democrats now have to do
Now,
as a
you
matter
already
Democrats now have to do as a matter
is to highlight Trump's
is to
fraud
highlight Trump's
and his administration's fraud, like Ossoff is trying to do. Here's the problem.
Right.
Ossoff
Ossoff
is like almost like a
is
lone
like almost
warrior
like a
on the
lone
Democratic
warrior
Party
on the
side.
Democratic Party
Because
side.
Ken Martin, the
Because
chair
Ken
of the
Martin,
party,
the chair of the
is
party,
in
is
turmoil.
in turmoil.
There are people asking for his
People asking
resignation.
for his resignation.
Right. Right.
He has no
He has
strategy.
no
He has
strategy.
no
He
national
has no
voice.
national voice.
But if he had
But
one,
if
he
he
should be
had one, he
saying
should be
Trump is
saying
corrupt,
Trump is
and all the
corrupt, and all
Republicans
the
who support his
Republicans who support his
corruption.
corruption.
I'm
But he
not going to
can't get
try to
away
give
with
him
it.
strategy here, but that's what they ought to be doing.
But
But they're
he
not
can't do
doing
it
it.
himself. But he can't do it, right? Based on his own background. If I, for a little bit I know, I
There
don't know
you
much.
go.
Right. I don't know much about him, but from what I could tell, he would just get caught out on his own stuff if he were to try to back
So
Ossoff
he's
on that. Okay.
self-preserving. And this
That
is
makes
why
sense.
Democrats always say, I don't like fraud in government. I don't like self-dealing. But Biden self-dealt.
Right.
Biden
Yeah,
had a
absolutely.
ton of fraud.
Yeah.
Okay? And so I want
want
the Democrats to straighten up and fly right. So my conservative family will straighten up and fly right. But they don't have to as long as the Democrats remain free.
No, it makes sense. I want to go back to a previous thing we were talking about because it was a good comment from one of our watchers. B House 23 says, an independent, you lose an opportunity to set the agenda and priorities for the party. Thank you for that thought, B Phone, because I call him. It's a good friend of mine. Because I guess that's something I haven't thought through. So I would be curious as to hear
I've
your.
thought about it a lot.
Yeah, I'm just saying I haven't. So I'm just saying, what's your response to? I think it's a comment that makes me think. So I want to hear your thoughts to it. Go ahead, brother.
So B House, and I think B House is a guy who pays attention to politics. So I want him to,
He does.
and any listener, to recognize that the swing voter that you hear political strategists target and go after so much, the swing voter is the independent. So swing voters have a huge impact. So yes, if you're voting in a hyper-partisan district where it's 80% Dem or 80% Republican, yeah, you go and become an independent. They don't need to chase after the independent vote. So it's really kind of, it depends.
But let me make sure I'm being fair to him and make sure you're answering it from what I think he's saying. He's saying just being an opportunity to set the agenda. So are you also saying, if I'm hearing you, Leo, are you also saying in the areas where they do need the swing voter can set the priorities on the agenda? Or are you just saying how important they are? Because I want to make sure
they're important.
Talking to what he's asking. Okay, gotcha.
Yep. They're important for voting. They're also important for policy making. So for right now, I am talking to policymakers from Rick Jackson, who's running for governor of Georgia. I'm talking to his policymaker. And I'm also talking to Bottoms as people who are going to enter into policy on their team for the potential of impacting their agendas. That's what I'm doing as a lobbyist.
Gotcha.
So
Now,
that's an independent person working for a particular agenda in both campaigns. That's what swing voters can do. So make your interest in your agenda items known, and there will be a large number of independent voters. The infrastructure isn't built because there's no money behind creating an agenda platform for independents.
Right.
But people like Joe Manchin are starting to do that. And so I think, brother, you'll find that there are more opportunities for independents to make their voices heard.
Now, great dialogue. Let me get you two more clips and we'll get you out of here, brother. All right. Let me go with this one.
If the U.S. was a household, it makes $50,000 a year. It spends $70,000, and it has household debt of $370,000. And the bad news is that all of the kids in that house are going to have to inherit that debt, even after mom and dad die.
Yep.
And we don't want to have an adult conversation. The adult conversation is the following.
It's a chainsaw.
If you believe that fiscal responsibility means not spending $7 trillion on $5 trillion in tax revenue. All roads lead to the same place, folks. You either have to cut costs or cut spending, or you have to raise taxes. And if you want to cut spending, you have to go after one or all of three areas. And that's either entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense spending, or the interest on our debt. If you don't go after one or all of those things, you're not serious about cutting our expenses. Or you have to acknowledge that the wealthiest in our society have figured out a way to weaponize the tax code and have an alternative minimum tax. The majority of very wealthy people pay very little in tax relative to their income, or increase corporate taxes. And what's the answer, folks? All of the fucking above. But nobody wants to have a fucking
Galloway is running for
conversation.
president. That's a really nice, I like all that. Scott. Well,
but the Democrats have an opportunity here, because the reality is the swing voters in every election that determines the president, it's not based on transgender rights. It's not based on Ukraine. As much as important as those issues are, they don't swing elections. What swings elections is people in their 30s who are moderates who basically vote on who they think will give them the best prospects to establish economic security and have a reasonable life. And it swings back and forth. It's a swing issue. And over the last 40 years, Democratic administrations have created 40 million jobs. Republicans have created 1 million. Democrats need to seize. We're the adults in the room. We have to have an honest, hard conversation around our deficits and our fiscal and monetary policy, because this is not sustainable. And you know what? People will respect it. And then when I ask Leader Jeffries, what they say is, well, at some point we're going to have that conversation. At some point tomorrow needs to be today. I think citizens are ready for this conversation.
Your thoughts? I know Scott Galloway is not one of your favorite persons, but we talk about ideas and not the person. So any dialogues about what he's referring to? Because what I know, when Shelley's on the show, he's always hype about and so mad about the big beautiful bill because it did the opposite of what it said, which is a continuation of what Scott Galloway talked about, which is basically continuing to run the government at debt. And he said, hey, there's some real conversations. And he says Democrats have an opportunity, if they choose it, to seize it, based on what's currently continuing to happen. So any thoughts on that?
So when I have issues,
okay, go ahead, bro.
I like Scott Galloway as an idealist. I just don't like how he sometimes moves into American politics. I'm an Americanist. I think our voices are the most important in America. So anyway, he just said what I said a little earlier. The swing voter, the independent voter is important, right? He just said. Here's the other thing that he's not. There's a large segment of American voters who don't give a crap about debt.
Right.
Donald Trump is increasing our debt at a level that no one's done in a long time. He is a debt leader. A Republican screaming about it. A few of them that always complain about the national debt. But as a whole, they're like, if my lifestyle is improving, if I'm doing all right, I'm okay with it. And at the same time, you got an extreme piece of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. They think America should go into debt in order to give people more stuff, more free stuff. So they're okay with that. So in other words, you got extreme right and extreme left that are okay with that. And most of the middle are just kind of soft about. So I don't like the federal debt. I think it weakens us. But then again, people go to the Federal Reserve and just spend more money. That is the way we are right now.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah, just calling it like it is. I got a couple comments I'm going to respond to, and then get the last clip and get you out of here. Thank you for the extra time. We're in the extra inning period, as we call it. I got one person who says black unemployment is the lowest it's been. He's funded HBCUs. He did more for you than any other president. If you're still watching, Dr. You clearly missed the beginning of the show, where no, black unemployment has actually jumped up from its lowest. Its lowest was under Biden at 4.8%. We're currently at 7.4%. Black unemployment specifically. His funding of HBCUs is actually was done in a different way, and it's not as much.
Also different administration.
Yeah, previous administration. Yeah, not in this administration. But even that way it was done ended up not being the more that they bragged about from a political narrative. I'm just calling it like it is. We tell it how it is on here, just so you know. And so they did more for than any other president, including Obama. That is a complete political narrative. And I saw somebody else say Obama did nothing for black people. And like I said, we're coming off of 2008. I love how y'all answered me earlier because I didn't think about it. It was just the fact that you didn't want to vote for Hillary. Like when y'all talked about, you and Shelley said you didn't want to vote for Hillary. And I actually could understand that, just being very honest. And, as an independent, hey, I was struggling with both sides as an independent. Believe you me, that's my reality at that time. So I forgot about that. That's what you're up against, not just simply Trump being brought on after what Obama had done, because it was hard economically to say there was something their brother had done wrong. Right? It was hard to say there was something economically had been done wrong. The most kids ever going to college, going to high school. This is all Americans, to include black Americans. And the reality is things were very good at that time, coming from 2008. That was an incredible job, just calling it like it is, from 2008 to 2016. All right, let me play this last clip and we'll get out of here.
The president's arrogance is on full display now. He just listed a 927-page financial disclosure document. It turns out that he was buying Apple Computer, then waiting a day and then tweeting to other people to buy it, which pushed the stock up. He was selling short the markets before his announcement of the tariffs, and then he was getting long the markets or buying the markets when he was putting a reprieve on the tariffs. And I think this type of reprehensible behavior is going to really hurt him, and I think it's going to hurt the Republicans in the midterm elections and likely in the 2028 elections. And somebody like Tucker Carlson is saying something I think quite interesting. It won't work, but he's saying, well, we have to have a third party. These two parties don't represent the interests of the Americans anymore, as evidenced by the voter registration. 43% of the Americans now have left the two parties and have registered as independents. And so when you think about that, these parties really don't represent us anymore. But because of gerrymandering and because of the things they've done operationally to tighten their hold on the system, they've become this cartel-like duopoly. And I think if we can get some political leaders in there to speak to the American people directly about what they're doing, whether it's Trump or, frankly, some of the Democratic socialists that are also populists, I think we can make some headway. The country is starving for straight-talking political leadership at this point.
I would offer that's pretty much what you've been saying this entire show, if that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, and that's the opportunity that we have, is to demand great talking, to make this shift, the pain that we felt from having Biden as a leader, from having Trump as a leader, and we can say no more and start to have an independent voice as Americans who want a politician that represents the Martin interests.
Nah, good stuff. All right, again, this is just something I had sitting on deck. And it just happens to be appropriate because I had somebody say, hey, Obama did nothing for black people. So, again, I think that's a political narrative. I'm going to let Obama answer himself. This is a clip from the Breakfast Club. And I'll just kind of, use this as the closing, just because it constantly gets said as we have these dialogues about where this administration sits on race. So great dialogue today. I thought we brought some politically conscious thoughts to these constant narratives. Oh, he's after us. No, he's not. And whatever. So I bring the clips and we talk through them, and I think people can hear, in a sense, the truth in it versus the narratives that are pushed by both sides, if that makes sense. But again, this is a chance for Obama to defend himself on the Breakfast Club, just saying what it is, calling it for what it is.
With reading this book and all that you did for every community, including our own community, how do you take it when you hear, especially African Americans and minorities, say that they feel that President Barack didn't do enough for minorities, or didn't do enough for black people? What are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I understand it, because when I got elected, there was so much excitement and hope, and I also think that we generally view the presidency as almost like a monarchy, in the sense of, well, once the president's there, he can just do whatever needs to get done. And if he's not doing it, then it must be because he didn't want to do it.
Well, we see it with Trump, so he does what he wants to do, so people assume.
Well, right, because he breaks laws.
Right.
and or disregards the Constitution. But look, I think that anybody who goes into public life, they need to understand that, yeah, you're going to get criticized because that's just the nature of it. If you don't want that, then you shouldn't be in that business. The good news for me was that I was very confident in what I had done for black folks because I had the statistics to prove it, right? So by the time I left office, you had seen 3 million African Americans have health care that didn't have it before. You had seen the incarceration rate, the number of black folks in prison, drop for the first time in years. You had seen the juvenile correction system, 30% fewer people in there. You had seen black poverty drop to its lowest level since 1968. You had seen black businesses rise. You had seen black income go up. So I could just look at the data and I could say millions of black folks were better off at the time I left office than when I came in. And you know, what I have to accept, and I think what any president has to accept, is the fact that, okay, so I got 20 million people health care, but there's still 10 million out there who don't have health care because Republicans blocked me from doing everything I wanted to do with Obamacare. I can understand why they would be upset. How come things didn't change?
I think people want to know, like, what did you do specifically for black people? Not the rising tide lifts all boats types of rhetoric, because we all know black people's boat got a hole in it. So the systemic things that were done to black people to put us in these positions, we need specific systemic things to get us out. So what did you do in that regard?
What I'm saying, Charlamagne, is black poverty dropped faster than everybody else. Black incomes went up more than a lot of other folks. So, you know, the issue is sometimes we just didn't go around advertising that because, once again, the goal here is to build coalitions where everybody is getting something so that they all feel like they've got a stake in it. But a lot of my policies were targeted towards people most in need. Those folks are disproportionately African American. Now, the truth of the matter is, Charlamagne, at the end of the day, there is no way in 8 years to make up for 200 years.
Absolutely.
I think that's a fair statement from the President Obama. I would challenge him on the income increase based on the data I've seen. But outside of the other things he said, I felt he gave it to a straight no chaser. I think he was accurate on his other numbers outside of the income increase. The income increase for everybody per se, but it wasn't like a closing of the gap per se. So I don't know if he was meaning that, but that's just the only number I would challenge based on my own research. And again, this is not me being a fan of Obama. This is, again, it's just politically conscious. We try to give it to you straight, no chaser. So in a sense, for those who say there was nothing done, he just broke down how it gets done politically. Because I would challenge, I often hear this in our community, we do think of it should be specifically written for black people, and that's not realistic in a melting pot of a country. It has to be done with coalitions. And I would offer for people who say or see it from that preview, that they don't understand how the politics actually works and how it has to be done with coalitions. And unless you learn to do that, you will have these agendas that are specifically for us that'll never go anywhere because you don't understand bridge building, which I always applaud King and the Big Six for understanding how to do it at the worst of times, how to build bridges and actually get something politically done for our community that I think, I always say this, we often dismiss now because we were granted and had the chance to live off of it. And so, as I always say, without that understanding, we've dropped the ball and now are kind of in this situation where we still have to learn political science, as Malcolm X always wanted to teach before he died. So without that process, we've gotten into a place where now we have to become politically conscious from my perspective. So thank you for your time, Leo. If you have a closing thought, give it to me now, and we're out of here.
Let's understand the difference between justice, and good, morality, and the right thing. Those two are not the same things. That's why we have a civil court and a criminal court. One is justice. One tries to say, let's reduce the harm, let's correct the harm. Obama is both. He says, I'm going to follow the law, but he says, I'm also going to try and implement policy that reduces the harm. To create policy and legislation that only impacts Black people is not just. Black people, I know we struggle with that because we felt like so much injustice has been done to us, but the right way to deal with that is not more injustice. Let's just chew on that for a bit and let's see where we go.
Hey, great final thought, brother. Let me see if the last comments, if I see anything I want to share before we go. Let me catch these last couple comments. All right, let's see. All right, I think that's it, brother. All right, thank you for your time, brother. See y'all next week.
Great show, man. Thank you for all the engagement.
Absolutely.